I pulled into the driveway just after 8, the streetlights flickering on one by one. Charleston was humid as always, heavy air that made everything feel a little slower, like the whole neighborhood was taking a nap. I'd been gone for 2 weeks. Between the mission briefing in Guam and my mother's stroke in Beaufort, I hadn't had a quiet moment in months. The Navy doesn't really do quiet, but home usually did. The house looked exactly like I remembered Melissa's place always did. Same porch swing that creaked when you touched it, same ceramic frogs lined up by the steps, the same overgrown azalea that I kept meaning to trim for her. The only thing different tonight was how dark it was. No porch light, no faint TV glow through the blinds, just stillness. I got out of the car, stretching my back. The street was empty. The only sound was a bug light humming somewhere. My sister wasn't much of a night owl, but she always kept the hallway light on for the dog she used to have. For the ghosts, she once joked. When I reached the door, I saw something odd. The mail slot was stuffed. Flyers, bills, one of those "we missed you" delivery slips dated 8 days ago. That wasn't like her. Melissa might forget her car keys, but she didn't forget the power bill. I knocked once, waited. Knocked again. Nothing. The door was locked. Her car was in the driveway. Her husband's wasn't. I pulled my phone out and called her. Straight to voicemail. The recorded voice, still cheerful, still her, "Hey, it's Melissa. Leave a message." Hit me harder than I expected. I tried her husband, Brandon. It rang 5 times, then went to voicemail too. I didn't leave a message. I just stood there a moment, listening. From inside, something creaked. Not loud, just the sound of something shifting weight. Maybe a floorboard, maybe plumbing. Still, my gut tightened. I'd learned to trust that gut. 5 deployments, a decade in Navy intelligence, and you pick up a sense for when things are wrong. And this house was wrong. I went around back. The yard was quiet except for the cicadas screaming from the trees. The back door had a new lock, one of those heavy-duty padlocks with a reinforced latch. I frowned. That wasn't there before. Melissa didn't even lock her back door half the time. My flashlight beam caught the side window. Curtains drawn tight, no light bleeding through. I tried peeking in but saw only the faint shape of furniture. I was starting to feel stupid breaking into my sister's house because she didn't answer her phone. But then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound. Tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Then silence. At first I thought it was a pipe, but pipes don't sound intentional. This was steady, measured, human. I froze, listening harder. The sound came again. Tap, tap, tap. Then a faint thud, like someone hitting wood with their palm. It was coming from below me. The basement. Melissa's house had one of those old brickwork basements from the 50s. She barely used it. Half the time it flooded in spring. The door to it was through the kitchen, and she always kept it closed because she hated spiders. I tried the back door. Locked tight. The padlock on it wasn't new from the hardware store either. It had scratches, like someone had been using it for a while. Something cold went down my spine. I went back to the car, grabbed the tire iron from the trunk. Years of field work make you practical. You don't walk into a dark house empty-handed. When I came back to the door, the tapping had stopped. I hit the padlock once. It clanged but held. Second swing it cracked loose. The latch dropped. The door creaked open, letting out a smell that made me step back. Rotten air, heavy and sour, like mildew and something worse. Inside, the kitchen looked fine at first glance. Clean counters, empty sink, cereal box half folded shut. Then I noticed the dust. Everything had a thin film of it. The clock on the wall blinked 12. Like the power had gone out and never reset. "Melissa?" My voice sounded too loud. Nothing. I turned on the light switch. Nothing happened. Power off, maybe. I moved to the hallway. Photos on the wall. The 3 of us at the beach, our parents' anniversary, Melissa and Brandon smiling at their wedding. She looked happy in those pictures. Or maybe she was just trying to... The basement door was at the end of the hall. It was locked, too, but this one had a hasp drilled in from the outside. That was new. You don't lock people out of a basement. You lock them in. I stared at it for a long second before forcing it open. The wood splintered around the latch. The smell hit again, stronger now. Sweat, urine, metal. I swallowed hard and turned on my flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, catching concrete steps, an old washing machine, a storage shelf, and then movement. At the far corner, someone flinched from the light. A hand went up, trembling. A voice came, hoarse and thin. "Teresa?" I nearly dropped the light. It was her, Melissa. She was sitting against the wall, barefoot, wrapped in a dirty blanket. Her hair matted, face sunken. She looked like she'd been down there for weeks. "Jesus, Melissa, what happened?" I was already moving toward her. She blinked at me, unfocused. "You came home," she whispered, like she wasn't sure if I was real. "Who did this?" I pulled the blanket around her shoulders. Her skin felt cold, clammy. She opened her mouth to speak but coughed instead. When she finally managed words, they came out broken. "Amber, she said I was sick. She said Brandon would fix it. Amber?" I repeated, confused. Our oldest sister hadn't spoken to Melissa in months. I got her upstairs, sat her on the couch, and called 911. My hands shook dialing the number, but my voice didn't. "You learned to compartmentalize." The dispatcher said help was on the way. As I waited, I looked around the room. Boxes stacked in the corner, bank papers, old clothes, an unplugged laptop still open on the table. The screensaver cycled through family photos like nothing was wrong. When the paramedics arrived, they moved fast. They asked the usual questions. "How long has she been down there? Does she live alone?" I didn't have good answers. One of them glanced at me. "Ma'am, whoever locked her in, they meant for her not to get out." I followed them to the ambulance. Melissa kept whispering my name, drifting in and out. The paramedic said she was dehydrated, low blood sugar, early signs of hypothermia. In June, I watched the doors close and the siren light wash over the house. My reflection flickered in the ambulance window. Half Navy uniform, half sister who should have come home sooner. Behind me, the house stood quiet again. Same porch swing, same ceramic frogs, same azalea. Only now, I knew what silence here meant. It wasn't peace. It was something buried. And whatever had been buried was just starting to surface. The hospital smell followed me all the way home, antiseptic and burnt coffee. The kind of scent that sticks in your hair and reminds you someone's life barely made it through the night. Melissa was stable. That's what the nurse said. Stable sounded like a lie people told when they didn't want to say, barely alive. When I unlocked the front door, the air inside the house was still thick. I left the lights off and let the flashlight guide me. I needed to see what I'd missed. The floor near the basement door was scuffed. Tiny half-moon marks lined the bottom edge, nail scratches. She'd tried to claw her way out. My stomach turned cold. I crouched down and noticed a faint outline of tape on the frame, like someone had sealed the door shut. Who tapes a basement door? The blanket I'd wrapped around her lay crumpled on the floor, dark stains spreading along the edges. I didn't want to think about what they were. I walked past it and opened the fridge, barely anything inside. A jar of pickles, expired milk, and 2 takeout boxes. Whoever had been here hadn't planned to stay long. I pulled open drawers, cabinet doors, anything that might explain what had happened. Nothing was broken, no sign of a fight, but the house was wrong in quiet ways. The family photos were gone from the walls. The silver frame that used to hold her wedding picture was empty. Upstairs, the bed was unmade, but not messy like someone had sat there, not slept there. On the dresser, I saw a single pill bottle labeled quetiapine, 25 milligrams, take nightly. The prescription name was right, the patient name wasn't. It said Amber Lewis. I stood there, staring at the label. Amber was our older sister. She didn't live here. She hadn't for years. The sound of the air conditioner kicking on made me flinch. My nerves were shot. I sat down on the edge of the bed and dialed the police detective who'd taken my statement, Detective Harris. He didn't sound surprised when I told him about the pill bottle. "Could be nothing," he said. "Could mean she was helping your sister manage her meds." "Amber doesn't help people," I said. He paused. "You're military, right? Maybe you should let us handle this one." That's what people always say right before they handle it wrong. After we hung up, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a small notebook, spiral bound, the kind you get at a dollar store. On the first page, in Melissa's handwriting, "Amber says I'm getting worse. I forget things. She says I scare Brandon when I scream. Page after page, short entries, scribbled fast. Some didn't make sense, some were just fragments. She said I need rest. I'm in the basement for my safety. I can't remember what day it is. I stopped reading after the line that said, "It's dark again." I think she took the light bulb. My throat felt dry. I needed air. Outside, the street looked normal. Neighbors' sprinklers hissing, porch TVs flickering blue through windows. No one had seen anything. Nobody ever does. I leaned against the porch rail and looked at my car. The front seat still had the hospital release papers sitting on it, folded neatly, useless. I got back inside and went straight to the basement. I had to see it again, even though every cell in my body told me not to. The stairs creaked as I went down. My flashlight swept over the concrete walls, the pipes overhead, the bucket in the corner. A thin blanket, the one she'd been wrapped in, lay in a pile. Beside it, a plastic cup and a half-empty water bottle. Something shiny caught my eye under the blanket, a key ring. I picked it up. 2 keys and a gym tag labeled Atlas Equity Group. I didn't know what Atlas Equity Group was, but it sure as hell wasn't Melissa's gym. I took a few pictures of the basement before leaving. When I locked the door behind me, the silence in that house felt heavier than before. At the hospital the next morning, Melissa was asleep. The nurse said she'd been talking in her sleep, mumbling names. I asked which ones. She flipped through her notes. Amber, Brandon, and yours. That last part shouldn't have made me feel guilty, but it did. The attending physician, Dr. Latham, met me outside the room. Your sister's been through severe trauma, he said. Malnutrition, dehydration, early hypothermia. But it's not just physical. There's clear psychological manipulation here. Whoever did this knew her mental state. She's been in therapy, I said. Depression, anxiety, but she's not delusional. He nodded slowly. Sometimes the people around us use that against us. Back at home, I couldn't shake his words. Use that against us. Amber had always been manipulative, sharp tongue, sharp smile. The kind of person who could insult you and make you thank her for it. The last time we spoke, she told me I hid behind my uniform because I didn't know who I was without it. Maybe she was right. But she also wasn't the kind of sister who visited out of love. By mid-afternoon, I started calling around neighbors, coworkers, anyone who might have seen her. One neighbor mentioned a white Lexus parked outside late at night earlier that week. Amber drove one. I checked Melissa's phone, which the paramedics had brought in a plastic bag. Dead battery. When it powered up, I found the last text sent from her number. Don't tell Teresa. She'll ruin everything. Sent to Amber. Ruin what? That's when I noticed the photos folder. The most recent ones were blank gray boxes. Deleted. But the cloud backup was still active. I opened the archive, scrolling until one image stopped me cold. Amber and Brandon, standing in front of a notary office. Melissa beside them, pale, eyes distant, pen in hand. The timestamp was 2 weeks ago. I zoomed in on the document she was signing. Even blurry, I could read the header. Power of attorney. Financial affairs. I felt the same kind of chill you get right before bad weather. The kind that makes you start closing windows even if the sky still looks clear. I emailed the photo to myself, then to the detective. He didn't respond right away. When he finally called back that evening, his voice was lower. This looks bad, he said. We'll dig into it. You should probably stay close to your sister. I told him I planned to. After we hung up, I sat in the living room staring at the blank TV screen. The light from the street lamps hit the framed photo of all 3 of us from years ago, Amber, me, and Melissa, lined up like the world hadn't started cracking yet. The photo's glass was clean, but the frame was dusty. I wiped it with my sleeve, and something small fell out from behind the corner of a receipt. A transfer notice from Coastal Federal Bank, dated last week. The amount? $75,000. Recipient, Atlas Equity Group. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You son of a bitch, I whispered. Outside, a car rolled slowly down the street, headlights sweeping across the front window. For a second, they hit the reflection of the basement door in the glass. It looked like a shadow moving, though nothing in the house had changed. The sound faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint ticking of the wall clock. The hour hand hadn't moved since the night before. The ticking clock on the wall still hadn't moved by morning. I hadn't slept, just sat there watching the minute hand refuse to shift. At some point, I realized I'd stopped expecting it to. Some things stay broken because someone wants them that way. By the time I got to the hospital, Melissa was awake, sitting up in bed, sipping water through a straw. Her hair had been brushed, but she still looked hollow, like someone had scooped her out from the inside. I asked if she remembered anything from before I found her. She blinked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "Amber told me you'd understand." I didn't know what that meant, and she couldn't explain it. Every time she tried, her voice faltered, as if her brain was walking through fog. The doctor said trauma could do that. I didn't argue. I just held her hand and waited until she fell asleep again. When I stepped out into the hallway, Detective Harris was waiting. Same cheap suit, same tired eyes that had seen too many bad homes. He nodded toward the room. "How's she doing?" "She's breathing. That's about all I can confirm." He didn't smile. "We checked the property records you sent over. That company, Atlas Equity Group, it's registered to Brandon Lewis. He used a Delaware shell. Your sister's signature is on the POA paperwork. We'll need her statement to move forward." "Statement?" I said. "She's barely conscious." "I know, but without her confirming she didn't sign willingly. It's a civil matter." Civil. That word made my jaw tighten. Civil meant paperwork, not prison. I followed him downstairs to the cafeteria, mostly because I needed coffee and somewhere to direct my anger. The place smelled like burnt toast and bad decisions. He opened his folder while I stirred sugar into my cup. "Here's where it gets strange," he said. "The notary's office where the POA was signed? No appointment records under your sister's name. Just a walk-in visit. The clerk said she seemed confused but cooperative. No signs of distress." "Of course not," I said. "Amber could talk a security guard into giving her the nuclear codes if she smiled long enough." He flipped another page. "Brandon's been telling people Melissa's having a mental breakdown. Claims you're overreacting because of your military background." I laughed once, short and sharp. "That's creative. Maybe I should let him explain that to my chain of command." He ignored the jab. "We'll be interviewing both of them soon. For now, don't confront anyone. Let us handle it." "And Ufik." I nodded because that's what you do when you know someone's already behind. Back at Melissa's house, I opened her laptop again. The desktop background was a picture of her garden, but every file folder looked too neat, too new. One folder stood out. House Insurance 2024. I clicked it. Inside were PDFs labeled with her name, but all created in the last week. The metadata listed the author as A. Lewis. Inside the documents, every signature looked shaky, like someone guiding her hand. My stomach twisted. I'd seen forged confessions overseas that looked cleaner than this. The front door creaked. I froze, listening. Then a voice familiar, casual, called out, "Hello?" I walked into the hall, every nerve lit. Amber stood there like she owned the place. Hair perfect, perfume sharp enough to choke on. "You didn't answer your phone," she said, stepping inside before I could stop her. I stared at her. "That's funny. I thought you'd be halfway out of the country by now." Eyeball. Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she gave me that look she'd perfected years ago, the one that said she was the adult in the room. "You shouldn't be here, Teresa. This is Melissa's home." "Yeah, and she's in the hospital because someone locked her in the basement." Amber exhaled through her nose like I was being dramatic. "She wasn't locked. She was safe. She was hurting herself, Teresa. Brandon and I did what we had to. All for 7. You call that safety?" "She has episodes," Amber said softly, hands clasped like she was explaining to a priest. "You've been gone too long. You don't see it anymore. She forgets to eat. She screams at nothing. She talks about Mom like she's still alive. Brandon was scared she'd run into the street. I wanted to hit something, preferably her face." "So you padlocked her in the dark and took her savings for a crypto fund?" She blinked, feigning confusion. "What savings? Don't play dumb." End quote. Amber's expression didn't change. Melissa agreed to help Brandon with an investment. It was her choice. Her choice? I took a step closer. "You used her condition to steal from her." Her voice sharpened. "I helped her, Teresa. You think you're the only one who can fix things because you wear a uniform. You abandoned her when Mom got sick. I stayed. I cleaned her house. I made sure she ate. You don't get to show up now and play hero. I could feel my pulse in my throat. You left her to die. Amber looked me dead in the eye and whispered, maybe that would have been easier. For a second, everything went quiet. The hum of the fridge, the distant traffic, even my breathing all gone. Then I turned, grabbed my phone, and snapped a picture of her right there in the doorway. She flinched. What the hell are you doing? Documentation, I said. You should appreciate that, being such a responsible citizen. She scoffed. You've really lost it. Good luck proving anything. She can't even remember what day it is. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. I stood there, staring at the padlock holes on the basement door until my hands stopped shaking. Later that afternoon, Detective Harris called again. We spoke to Amber and her husband, he said. They claim your sister asked to be confined because she felt unsafe. They've got a notarized statement backing that up. I almost laughed. A statement signed by who? The same notary who forgot to check ID? He sighed. We'll keep digging, but without direct proof she was coerced, it's hard to move this past neglect. I hung up without saying goodbye. By nightfall, I drove to Melissa's house again. The police tape fluttered weakly on the porch, already peeling. I sat in my car, headlights off, watching the place. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. You should stop digging. Some things are better left buried. No signature, no photo, but the timing wasn't subtle. I saved the number, sent it to Harris, then sat back staring at the dark windows. I didn't know if Amber was bluffing, but I'd spent too long in places where threats were currency, and this one was cheap. I went inside again, flashlight in hand. On the kitchen counter, a small yellow post-it caught the light. It wasn't there before. 3 words. Neat handwriting. You're not safe. Line. I didn't move for a while, just let the words sit there. Then I took out my phone, snapped a picture, and turned off the flashlight. The dark didn't bother me anymore. What bothered me was realizing someone else had been here to leave that note and I'd missed them by minutes. The yellow note sat on my kitchen table all night. I didn't touch it again, just stared at it until dawn. The words burned into my brain. You're not safe. Maybe it was a scare tactic. Maybe it was a confession. Either way, it told me one thing: Amber wasn't done. By sunrise, I was in motion. I called a guy from my unit, Lieutenant Pruitt, now working JAG. We'd shared a tent in Bahrain and too many bad cups of coffee since. He owed me a favor. Atlas Equity Group, I told him over the line. Run it. Delaware registration, Brandon Lewis as principal. I need everything: directors, shell layers, financial flow. He didn't ask why. He just said, give me a few hours. Less. That's the thing about the military, you learn who to call when you can't go through the front door. While I waited, I went through Melissa's bank statements again. The withdrawals were spaced out $25,000 at a time, all within 2 weeks. Each transfer went to a routing number in New York, then bounced offshore. There were no purchases, no debts cleared, no legitimate receipts. Brandon hadn't even tried to hide it. I started building a folder on my laptop: photos, texts, the basement pictures, the forged documents. Every mission starts with evidence. You don't engage until you can prove what you're hitting. At 11, Pruitt called back. Your brother-in-law's company's a ghost, he said. Registered 6 months ago. Address leads to a P.O. box. But guess who filed the paperwork? Amber. Bingo. She's listed as operations partner. That company's been used for at least 3 transfers totaling about $175,000 in the last month. Where'd it go? He hesitated. Hard to say. The trail disappears through something called Thornfield Holdings in the Caymans. It's classic laundering. Somebody's trying to wash stolen funds. I felt my jaw tighten. Can you get me the corporate filings? You didn't hear this from me, he said. Then I heard the sound of a file dropping into my inbox. The PDF opened with a satisfying click: names, timestamps, signatures. Amber's handwriting was right there, looping and careful, on every authorization. By noon, I was parked outside Brandon's office in Mount Pleasant. The company name on the door wasn't Atlas, it said Lewis Consulting Group. Another lie. The receptionist looked about 19, all pink nails and nerves. Can I help you? She asked. Yeah, I said, flashing my old military ID. I'm here about a financial investigation. You might want to tell your boss. She disappeared into the back. I waited, scanning the office. Cheap motivational posters, empty desks, a printer out of toner, no signs of real business. When Brandon finally appeared, he looked surprised but recovered fast. The man could have sold snake oil to snakes. "Teresa," he said, like I was an unexpected guest at a barbecue. "I heard you've been concerned." "That's one word for it," I said. "Want to tell me why my sister's money is funding your startup?" He gave a small laugh. "You're mistaken. Melissa offered to help. She wanted to invest. She's in the hospital, Brandon. She can't remember what day it is. You think a confused woman can authorize $175,000 in transfers?" His smile tightened. "You should be careful making accusations like that. You're a Navy officer. I'd hate to see this turn into defamation." "Yeah, I'll take that risk." He leaned forward, voice lowering. "Amber said you were intense, but I didn't realize you'd go full Rambo on family." That almost made me smile. "If you knew Rambo, you'd be hiding better." I walked out before I did something career-ending. Outside, the sun was blinding. I sat in my car for a minute, breathing. The rage had nowhere to go, so I focused on process, information, timing, target. At 2:30, Harris called again. "We've confirmed the power of attorney documents were filed at a notary in Somerville," he said. "Your sister's signature matches her ID, but the witness signatures are fake." "Amber's handwriting?" "Likely, but handwriting analysis takes time." "Amber and Brandon still in town?" He hesitated. "Supposedly, but their cell phones pinged near Hartsfield-Jackson yesterday." "Atlanta Airport." I opened my laptop and checked the airline records Pruitt had slipped me. One of them matched 2 tickets to Lisbon, Portugal, booked under A. Lewis and B. Lewis. Departure, 3 days from now. I called Harris back. "You've got 48 hours before they vanish," I said. He muttered something I couldn't catch. "We'll put out a travel alert." I hung up and started packing a bag. People think revenge is rage, but it's not. It's clarity. Every emotion funnels into one single steady objective. By sunset, I was in my car heading toward Atlanta. The highway stretched out long and flat, the kind of drive that gives you too much time to think. I kept replaying Amber's voice. "You don't get to show up now and play hero." Maybe she was right, but heroes don't leave people in basements. Halfway there, I stopped at a rest area, opened my laptop again, and typed out a formal report to the NCIS liaison I knew from my deployments. "Potential financial exploitation of a military-dependent family member," I wrote. It was the cleanest way to make them look. By the time I reached the outskirts of Atlanta, it was past midnight. I pulled into a motel off I-285, the kind with flickering neon and rooms that smelled faintly of bleach and regret. I couldn't sleep. The laptop screen glowed soft blue as I searched. Thornfield Holdings. It led me to an online investor forum full of angry retirees people who'd lost savings in low-risk crypto pools managed by the same fake company. Brandon wasn't just stealing from family. He was running a scam. At 3 a.m., a message popped into my inbox from Pruitt. "For your information, your suspects just tried to transfer another $50 Kelvins." The bank froze it. That was the first good news all week. At dawn, I drove to the nearest police precinct and handed them everything: bank statements, emails, corporate filings, screenshots. The detective on duty looked exhausted but impressed. "You did all this yourself?" "Military training," I said. "We don't wait for permission to solve problems." End of tree. By noon, I was back on the highway to Charleston. Phone buzzing nonstop. One call from Harris, one from the NCIS rep confirming they'd opened a parallel file. Amber and Brandon were officially flagged in 2 systems. Still, none of it felt like victory. The image of that basement wouldn't leave me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Melissa sitting in the dark, knees drawn up, whispering my name. When I got back into town, the air felt heavier. The humidity clung to everything, like even the weather was tired of being polite. I parked outside the hospital again, watching the automatic doors slide open and close. Inside, Melissa was awake, watching TV. She looked at me like I was someone she used to know. "You're back," she said. "I never left," I lied. Her hands shook when she reached for the remote. "Amber called," she said softly. "She said you're trying to hurt her." I felt something twist behind my ribs. She's lying, Melissa. End of trap. She looked at me for a long time, then whispered. She said she's scared of you. I didn't answer. Some lies are too heavy to argue with. The nurse came in to adjust her and I stepped into the hallway. My phone buzzed again, unknown number. Text, Flight Adel, list 10:45 p.m., gate 42. No name. No explanation. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I turned and walked toward the exit, the automatic doors sliding open like they'd been waiting for me. The drive back to Atlanta felt shorter the second time, maybe because I wasn't thinking about the miles. I was thinking about gate numbers, flight times, and how two people could walk through airport security with stolen money and a clean conscience. The text message didn't say who sent it, but I had a good idea. Someone wanted me to stop them. Or someone wanted me to walk into something I couldn't walk out of. Either way, I was going. I kept my phone plugged into the dashboard, tracking the time 3 hours until their flight. I called Harris first. He didn't answer. Then NCIS. The liaison said they'd notify airport security, but their jurisdiction didn't extend to civilian flights without a warrant. Translation: I was on my own until the paperwork caught up. By the time I reached the parking deck at Hartsfield-Jackson, I was running on adrenaline and bad coffee. The place buzzed with noise families, rolling suitcases, someone yelling about a missed connection. It was chaos, which worked in my favor. I kept my cap low, jacket zipped. Years of surveillance work had taught me that you don't blend in by hiding, you blend in by moving like you belong. I walked the concourse, checking every departure board until I saw it. Lisbon, gate 42, on time. Perfect. I positioned myself near the Hudson News store, line of sight on the gate. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then I saw them Amber first, then Brandon, rolling matching luggage. They looked relaxed, like a couple heading to a honeymoon instead of an extradition nightmare. Amber wore sunglasses indoors, which told me everything about her state of mind. I pulled my phone out and hit record. Old habits die hard. The camera caught them checking in, handing over passports, chatting like this was a vacation. I was halfway through sending the footage to Harris when 2 TSA officers appeared from the terminal hallway. One whispered into his radio. Another walked directly toward the boarding line. "Mrs. Lewis," he said. Amber froze mid-step. Brandon tried to smile. Failed. "Could you both step aside, please?" They hesitated, then followed the officer. Within seconds, 2 more appeared, airport police this time. The sound of handcuffs clicked louder than the announcements overhead. Passengers turned to stare. Phones already out. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. Amber's sunglasses slipped down her nose, and for the first time in years, I saw her look genuinely afraid. She glanced around the terminal until her eyes locked on mine across the crowd. Her mouth moved 2 words I could read from here. "You did." The officers led them away through the side exit. The boarding gate reopened. A voice on the loudspeaker announced the next group to Lisbon. Life moved on like nothing had happened. I sat down at an empty gate nearby, heartbeat still racing. I texted Harris 1 word: "Got them." He called within minutes, voice filled with static and disbelief. "How the hell did you never mind? They're in custody. Good work, Commander." I didn't feel like it was good work. I felt like I just buried something I'd never dig up again. When I got back to Charleston, Harris filled me in on the details. He was at his desk, half-eaten sandwich next to a stack of paperwork. He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen were 2 booking photos, Amber and Brandon, both in holding uniforms, both staring blankly into the camera. Amber's hair was pulled back tight, but her eyes, she looked like she still believed she was going home. "They didn't resist?" I asked. "Not a bit," he said. "She cried when they cuffed her, said it was a misunderstanding. The husband clammed up until we showed him the fraud files. Then he started singing like a choir boy." "What's he saying?" "That Amber planned it, that she handled the transfers, forged the documents, even scheduled the flights. He's already asking for a plea deal." I leaned back in the chair. "So he throws her under the bus." "Looks that way," Harris said. "Honestly, he's smart too. The evidence on her is airtight. On him, it's mostly accessory and financial crime. He'll get less time if he cooperates." I stared at Amber's photo. "She'll hate him for that." "Probably," Harris said. But she should have thought of that before she locked her own sister in a basement. Later that night, I sat in the hospital parking lot, engine off, lights out. I didn't want to go inside yet. The rain had started again, gentle at first, tapping against the windshield like someone knocking. I thought about the first time Amber had ever lied to me. We were kids. She broke Mom's glass bowl and blamed it on me. I took the punishment because I didn't want her to get hit. I remember her saying, "You're good at this. You should always be the one who takes the fall." I guess she thought that rule still applied. Inside, the nurse said Melissa was asleep, but I went in anyway. The lights were dim, machines humming steady. I sat beside her bed, the rain still faint against the window. I told her quietly, "They caught her. She can't hurt you anymore. Now." She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Amber? She's somewhere safe," I said. It was the closest thing to the truth that wouldn't shatter her. Melissa smiled weakly. "Good. She worries too much." I nodded because what else was there to do? The next morning, Harris called again. "You might want to know Amber asked for you. Said she wants to talk." I laughed under my breath. "In person?" "Yeah, county lockup. Says she won't speak to anyone else." "What?" "Let her wait," I said. But I went anyway. The facility was gray, sterile, and smelled like bleach. I'd seen interrogation rooms that looked more welcoming. They brought her in wearing the same orange jumpsuit as her mugshot. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. Her voice, though, was still the same steady, soft, almost condescending. "Teresa," she said, like she was greeting an old friend. "You look tired." I folded my arms. "You look guilty." She tilted her head. "They're saying terrible things about me. You don't really believe them, do you?" "I saw the documents. The transfers. The texts. You did this." Amber's smile faltered. "You think you understand, but you don't. You've always seen the world in orders and checklists. There's no room for gray with you. But people, they're complicated. You locked your sister in a basement," I said flatly. "She was losing control," Amber said. "She wasn't taking her meds. She kept screaming about people watching her. I tried to help." Brandon said the dark would calm her down. "And you took her money while she calmed down?" Amber's voice dropped to a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. We were going to give it back once we got settled. I just needed to get away from him first." I studied her face. She meant it. At least, she thought she did. Amber always believed her own lies before anyone else did. "Tell the police that," I said. She shook her head. "I'd rather tell you. You're the one who needs to understand." "Understand what?" "That you're not better than me," she said. "You wear your medals, you save strangers, but you couldn't even save your own family." I stood up. "You're right," I said, "because I was too busy cleaning up yours." She didn't respond as the guard led her back to the door. Just before she disappeared, she said, "They'll believe me before they believe you. You always make things look like a mission, and people hate heroes, Teresa. They always have." The metal door closed behind her, echoing down the hallway. Outside, the air smelled like rain again. Harris was waiting near the exit. "That went well?" he asked. "She's the same as always," I said, "only now she has an audience." He nodded toward the car. "Chen's filing the formal charges today. With Brandon flipping, it's open and shut. You should go home, get some rest." I didn't. I drove to Melissa's house instead. The police had finished processing the scene, and it was open again. The smell of damp concrete still lingered in the basement. The scratches on the door were faint now but still visible. I traced them with my fingers one by one. Every mark was a reminder that none of this was ever about money. It was about control. Amber had always needed to win, no matter the cost. Upstairs, I found a framed photo I hadn't noticed before. Amber, Melissa, and me standing in front of Dad's old fishing boat. We were kids, barefoot and smiling. I took the photo out of the frame and folded it into my pocket. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The street was quiet again. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder. But peace isn't the same thing as closure. Peace is just what's left when you've already lost everything that could still hurt you. And that kind of peace doesn't last long. The Charleston courthouse smelled like dust and stale air. Everything about it felt temporary: paper signs taped to walls, coffee rings on desks, the kind of place where lives get decided before lunch. I sat across from Chen, the prosecutor, while she read through a stack of reports I'd given her. She didn't waste words, and I liked that about her. "You'll need to testify," she said without looking up. "We'll go over your statement in detail next week." "I've been through worse briefings," I said. She looked up then. "This isn't a briefing, Commander. This is family." That part stung, mostly because it was true. I wasn't walking into a courtroom. I was walking into a bloodline turned inside out. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table going through everything one last time. The evidence folder was thick bank records, forged signatures, the basement photos. Every document felt like a small betrayal preserved on paper. Melissa was home too, discharged under supervision. She stayed in the guest room now, mostly quiet. The meds helped her sleep, but the nights were rough. She'd wake up screaming sometimes, calling my name, asking to be let out. I'd sit by her bed until she calmed down. One night she looked at me and whispered, "You don't have to hate her for me." "I don't hate her," I said. "I just finally see her." She smiled faintly. "She always said you'd choose the uniform over us." I didn't answer. Some things are better left uncorrected. The next morning, I met with Harris and Chen again. They'd been building the prosecution timeline, everything from the fraudulent transfers to the text messages between Amber and Brandon. Chen flipped open her laptop. "This is our sequence," she said. "We start with the power of attorney, move to the bank withdrawals, then the basement confinement. Each one shows deliberate planning." She clicked to the next slide. A transcript of texts appeared. "Amber, she keeps crying for your dad. This isn't going to work. Brandon, she'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps." I read the line 3 times. The words didn't look human to me anymore. Chen watched my face. "You'll need to testify to context. Explain her state when you found her." "I can do that." She nodded. "Good. Because Amber's defense is going to claim you have a vendetta, that you manipulated the investigation because of old family issues." I almost laughed. "That's creative." "It's effective," Chen said. "If they can paint you as emotionally unstable or overbearing, it muddies the intent. They'll use your military record against you." I raised an eyebrow. "My record's clean." She smiled without humor. "Doesn't matter. They'll say you have control issues, that you've always had to be in charge, that you treated your sister like a subordinate." That one hit lower than expected. She wasn't wrong. Structure and control were how I survived. I just hadn't realized how they might look under courtroom lights. After the meeting, I walked along the waterfront for a while, trying to clear my head. The salt air always helped me think. Boats drifted out toward the horizon, small and steady. I envied them. They didn't have to answer for what they'd seen. Back at the house, Melissa was sitting at the table with a jigsaw puzzle she hadn't touched in weeks. She looked up as I came in. "Did they ask about me?" "They'll ask later," I said. "They just need you to rest for now." She nodded slowly, fitting 2 pieces together with a small click. "Amber used to love puzzles. She said everything could fit if you forced it enough." That sounded exactly like her. The next few days felt mechanical: interviews, subpoenas, psychological evaluations. Chen had a forensic psychiatrist talk to Melissa. He told me afterward that her trauma was consistent with prolonged confinement and coercion. I didn't need his degree to confirm it. One night, unable to sleep, I opened the basement door again. I'd cleaned it weeks ago, but the air still smelled faintly of mold and something older. The walls bore faint scrape marks, places where the paint had peeled from moisture. I imagined her sitting here, hour after hour, waiting for someone who might never come. I closed the door quietly, locking it this time not out of fear but respect. When I got back upstairs, my phone buzzed. A message from Chen. "Brandon's taking a plea. He'll testify against Amber." I read it twice, then put the phone down. Brandon flipping didn't surprise me. Men like him always needed someone else to point to when things went bad. The real twist was that it meant Amber would stand alone. The next morning, Harris called. "They're moving fast," he said. "Arraignment's next week, trial date after that. You'll probably be our lead witness." "Wouldn't be the first time someone called me a witness," I said. He chuckled once, then grew serious. "You okay with this? It's not easy testifying against family." "Easy's overrated," I said. That night, I sat down to draft my testimony. It felt strange writing it all out how I found her. The smell, the state she was in. I wrote it exactly as it happened. No emotion, no embellishment. The truth didn't need decoration. Halfway through, Melissa came to the doorway. She looked smaller than I remembered. "Are you writing about her?" "About what happened," I said. She nodded, then walked over and set something on the table, a folded piece of paper. "She sent me this before the hospital. I forgot I had it." It was a letter, written in Amber's neat handwriting. "Melissa, don't listen to Teresa. She's only here to make herself feel better. You belong with family, not strangers. If things get bad, I'll fix it. I always fix it." I read it again, slower this time. Amber's words were always polished poison, sweet enough to swallow, deadly once inside. I folded the letter back up and slid it into the evidence folder. "Did I do something wrong?" Melissa asked quietly. "No," I said. "You trusted the wrong people." She smiled faintly. "That's what Mom used to say about Dad." I didn't respond. I just kept writing. Later, when the house was quiet, I sat by the window, rereading my notes. I thought about all the times I'd ignored my instincts because the person in question was blood. Turns out blood doesn't mean loyalty, it just means shared DNA and shared history. The night air smelled like rain again, but it didn't feel heavy this time. It felt clean. For the first time, I could almost believe that maybe this would end with something resembling justice. Then my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. One message. "You think this is over?" It's not. No name, no trace. Just the same voice from the dark that never quite goes away. I turned off the screen and set the phone face down, the glow fading against the tabletop until all that was left was quiet. The courthouse was full by the time I walked in. Reporters lined the hallway, holding microphones like they were fishing rods waiting for something ugly to surface. I didn't give them anything. The only thing that mattered was the room at the end of the hall, the one where Amber would finally face what she'd done. Inside, everything looked smaller than I expected. 12 jurors, 1 judge, 2 lawyers, and the ghost of every decision we'd ever made as a family. Chen gave me a nod from the prosecution's table. Amber sat across the room beside her attorney, dressed neatly in beige, hair down this time, pretending to be fragile. Brandon sat a few rows away under separate counsel, eyes on the floor. The clerk called the case. The charges sounded mechanical elder abuse, fraud, unlawful confinement, but each one carried the weight of that basement. Amber didn't flinch at any of them. Chen stood first. "The evidence will show," she began, "that the defendant, Amber Lewis, intentionally exploited her sister's medical condition for financial gain, and when that wasn't enough, confined her to a basement to silence her. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The truth carried its own volume." Amber's lawyer rose next, soft-spoken, polite, rehearsed. "This case isn't about malice," he said. "It's about a family in crisis, mental health, misunderstanding, and love gone wrong. Ari, love gone wrong." I could almost laugh. The first day was all evidence bank statements, the forged POA, text messages, the photo of the basement. The jury didn't move much, but I saw their eyes. You can't unsee something like that. On day 2, the prosecution played the police body cam footage from the night they entered Melissa's house. The screen showed the basement door, the lock hanging loose, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Then the sound Melissa's weak voice calling my name. The jurors leaned forward. One of them covered her mouth. Chen didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The footage spoke for both of us. Amber sat still, expression unreadable. Her lawyer scribbled notes he'd never use. When it was my turn to testify, the bailiff swore me in. The wood of the witness stand felt rough under my palms. Chen started gently, keeping her voice low. "Commander Whitmore, can you tell the court what you found when you returned home?" I did. I told them about the silence, the smell, the locked door. I told them how Melissa looked when I carried her upstairs, how her skin was cold, how her voice cracked when she said Amber's name. I kept it simple. I'd learned long ago that emotion dulls truth. Then, the defense took over. "Commander," the lawyer said, smiling like we were at a family reunion. "You've served in military intelligence for over a decade, correct?" "Yes." "So, you're trained in interrogation, surveillance, psychological assessment?" "I'm trained to recognize danger." Would you say that training might affect how you perceive others' actions? Perhaps cause you to see malice where there's confusion? I don't perceive malice, I said. I identify intent. He paced slowly. You've had disagreements with your sister before, haven't you? Over family matters? Everyone does. But you describe your relationship as strained? I'd describe it as over. He hesitated, like that wasn't in his script. You seem angry. I am. Toward whom? Toward anyone who locks a defenseless woman in a basement. He didn't ask more. The courtroom was quiet when I stepped down. Chen gave me a small nod approval, or gratitude, or both. Melissa's testimony came next. The judge allowed it under medical supervision. She was led in by a nurse, fragile but calm. The prosecutor kept her questions gentle. Melissa, do you remember the last time you saw Amber before you went to the hospital? Melissa frowned, thinking. She said I was sick, that I needed rest. What happened next? She said the basement was safer. There weren't any voices there. Some jurors glanced at Amber. She didn't look up. Did you agree to stay there? I thought she'd come back, Melissa whispered. She said she'd bring food. Did she? No. Chen stopped there. She didn't need to go further. The defense declined cross-examination. They knew better than to look like bullies. Then came Brandon. He looked thinner, hair cropped short, hands clasped like a repentant priest. He spoke for nearly 2 hours, outlining everything: the fake company, the withdrawals, the escape plan. He told them Amber was the mastermind, that she researched elder exploitation laws, picked the notary, scheduled my trip around the plan. She said Melissa wouldn't remember, he told the court. She said confusion was an advantage. Amber finally spoke then, whispering something to her attorney, but it was too late. The damage was done. On day 4, Amber took the stand herself. Her voice trembled just enough to sound coached. I was trying to protect her, she said. She was getting worse. She forgot things. She was scared of noises that weren't there. Chen's cross-examination was surgical. You told your husband, quote, she'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. What were you referring to? Amber hesitated. I was talking about her anxiety. And by helping her anxiety, you mean confining her without light, food, or water? Amber's composure cracked. I didn't mean for her to suffer. Yet she did, Chen said. For 14 days. And you were planning to leave the country when she was found? Does that sound like concern to you? Amber's lip trembled, but there were no tears. The room was silent, except for the judge's pen scratching notes. By the time closing arguments came, everyone looked exhausted. Chen stood before the jury and said simply, You don't need to imagine what happened. You've seen it. You've heard it. All we ask is that you remember it. And Fort. The defense gave one last plea about mental strain and family confusion. Nobody seemed convinced. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. 4 hours for 14 days in a basement. When they came back, the foreman didn't look at Amber. Guilty on all counts, he said. Amber's attorney put a hand on her arm. She pulled away. Her eyes found me across the room. There was no rage this time, no smugness, just disbelief. Like she still thought she could talk her way out of justice. The judge set sentencing for next month. The gavel came down. People started moving again. Reporters, officers, clerks, but it all sounded far away. I walked out of that room and into the sunlight, and for the first time since I'd opened that basement door, the air didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel like peace either, just empty space where something poisonous used to live. The sentence came down on a gray Monday morning that felt like every other gray Monday I'd ever lived through. The courtroom was half full this time. No cameras, no reporters, just a few people who'd survived the wreckage of someone else's choices. The judge read the verdict in the same tone you'd use to read the weather. Clear skies for some, storms for others. Amber got 12 years. Brandon got 8. Neither of them reacted. Brandon stared at the table. Amber looked straight ahead like she was already somewhere else. The judge's gavel hit the desk, and that was it. Afterward, Chen shook my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I wanted to ask her if that still mattered. The courthouse hallway was empty by the time I left. My shoes echoed off the marble. Outside, the sun had burned through the clouds, but the heat felt wrong, too bright, too loud, too soon. I stood there for a moment, watching the police van pull away. For the first time, I realized I didn't actually know where it was going. The week after sentencing was paperwork. Always paperwork. Civil suit filings, restitution forms, insurance claims. My lawyer, an older guy named Walsh, told me to sue both of them for damages. Even if they don't have a dime, he said, you make sure their future earnings belong to you. It's about principle. Principle sounded nice. It also sounded useless. The money was gone. The house was half mortgaged again. Melissa's care wasn't cheap, but the real loss wasn't measured in numbers. It was in time. 2 weeks in that basement. 8 months of court. A year of watching my sister slowly forget the people who'd hurt her, and sometimes forget the one who hadn't. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a drink and listen to the crickets. Charleston nights had a way of pretending everything was peaceful. Sometimes I almost believed it. Melissa moved into a full-time care facility on the north side of town. The doctors said she needed structure, routine, consistency, things I used to be good at providing. I visited every few days. She liked the garden. They had these white benches under the magnolia trees. We'd sit there, and she'd talk about Mom like she was still alive, like we'd just seen her last week. One afternoon, she turned to me and said, Amber called. She's coming for dinner. I didn't correct her. I just said, that's nice, Mel, and let her keep that version of reality. After the visit, I sat in my car for a while before driving off. My phone buzzed with a notification from the civil court. The judgment had gone through. The court had ruled in our favor, $375,000 in damages, jointly owed by Amber and Brandon. A number on a screen. It might as well have been a lottery ticket from a past life. I called Walsh. So what does this mean? He sighed. It means if they ever earn a paycheck, you'll get the first cut. But don't expect much. People don't make money in prison. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the Department of Justice Standard Restitution Notice. Amber and Brandon were officially responsible for $175,000 plus interest. Another number. Another reminder. I poured another drink and stared at the paper until the words blurred. A few days later, a package arrived from Chen's office. Inside was a copy of the official case file photos, statements, transcripts. The final line of the report read, "Case closed." I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that. Frame it? Burn it? Instead, I filed it next to my deployment medals. Both were proof of survival. Neither felt like victory. People started asking questions again. Old neighbors, coworkers, even a few reporters who'd moved on to new scandals but still wanted a follow-up. They asked if I regretted pressing charges, if I thought 12 years was fair, if I'd ever speak to Amber again. I told them all the same thing. Justice isn't supposed to feel good. It's just supposed to be done. Ever 6. At the base, I got pulled into an internal review standard procedure for active personnel involved in public cases. They wanted to make sure I hadn't misused my position or contacts during the investigation. I told them I'd done everything by the book. Technically, that was true. They didn't need to know how close I'd come to stepping off the book entirely. After the review, my commanding officer called me in. He was an old man who'd seen enough to know when to keep quiet. You did what you had to, he said, but don't let it eat you alive. I told him it wouldn't. I lied again. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. The story of the Navy officer who caught her sister was just another internet ghost. People moved on. But trauma doesn't respect deadlines. It lingers like humidity, it doesn't leave. It just changes shape. One evening, I went to see Melissa again. She was calmer that day, humming to herself as she arranged puzzle pieces on the table. The nurse told me she'd stopped asking for Amber as often. I wasn't sure if that was progress or surrender. When I sat beside her, she looked up and smiled. Do you remember when Dad used to make pancakes on Sundays? Yeah, I said. He always burned the first one. She laughed softly. Amber used to sneak the burnt ones to the dog. I smiled too, even though that memory hurt more than anything else ever could, because for a few seconds, we were just sisters again, not victims, not survivors. Just us. Later, when I got home, I opened my laptop to an email from the prison system automated update. Amber Lewis, assigned to Grand Valley Institution for Women. Estimated parole eligibility, 8 years. I deleted it without reading further. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what she was doing there. Was she still manipulating people, still smiling her way through walls? Did she ever think about what she'd done? I never asked for updates after that. I didn't need to know. Life kept moving in small, stubborn ways. Bills to pay. Cars to fix. The little mechanics of being alive. I started volunteering with a local veterans outreach program. It wasn't therapy, but it kept my hands busy. The stories I heard there reminded me that pain wasn't personal, it was just common. One of the other volunteers asked once if I believed in redemption. I said I believed in accountability. Redemption's a luxury. Accountability is survival. That night, I drove back to the hospital, not for Melissa this time, but to drop off a donation check for the staff fund. The nurse who'd cared for her in those first nights was there. She smiled when she saw me. "You look better," she said. "Just quieter," I told her. Outside, the air was heavy with the smell of rain. Charleston in summer always feels like it's holding its breath. I looked toward the horizon, the same gray sky, the same endless coastline. The world doesn't care who wins or loses inside a courtroom. It just keeps turning. And somehow, so did I. The morning I decided to sell the house, the light came through the kitchen blinds the same way it always had, soft, slanted, golden. You'd never know that room had once been full of detectives, evidence bags, and questions I didn't have answers for. The realtor said it was a good market, like grief could be priced per square foot. I didn't argue. Some things stop feeling like home long before you move out. The paperwork went through faster than I expected. I used part of the sale to set up the Whitmore Trust, Melissa's long-term care, automatic payments to her facility, plus a small fund for Alzheimer's research. It wasn't charity. It was atonement. A way to make sure that, after everything, something good still stood on the bones of what we'd lost. Melissa didn't understand the move. The last time I visited her before closing, she looked around the garden like she'd never seen it before. "Do you live here now?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'll be nearby." She smiled and nodded, then went back to humming softly. She was folding paper napkins into strange shapes, boats maybe, or birds. I couldn't tell anymore. I kissed her forehead before leaving. She didn't recognize the gesture, but she smiled anyway. The drive back to the house was quiet. Charleston had that late summer haze again, the kind that makes the air shimmer. The radio played some old Fleetwood Mac song I hadn't heard since high school. I left it on. When I pulled into the driveway, there was an envelope sitting on the porch. No return address. The handwriting was neat, almost too neat. I opened it inside. It was from Amber. No threats, no apologies. Just 4 lines. "I dream about the basement sometimes. I wake up thinking you're still there. Maybe we both are. You'll see that one day." I folded the letter once, twice, then dropped it into the garbage disposal. The metal blades chewed through her handwriting until it was dust. There's a difference between closure and silence. Silence is what happens when everyone finally stops asking. Closure is what you build yourself, brick by brick, after the world has moved on. After I sold the house, I moved into a small apartment closer to the harbor. No ghosts, no locks on basement doors. Just salt air and space. I kept my old Navy uniforms boxed in the closet, along with a few framed photos, Melissa and me at Dad's boat, Mom holding us on the pier, the 3 of us laughing at something I can't even remember. The first few nights were strange. I'd wake up around 3 a.m., convinced I'd heard someone calling from another room. Sometimes I'd get up and check anyway. Old habits die quietly, but they never really die. During the day, I spent time at the Veterans Center. The guys there didn't ask about my case, they'd read the papers, but no one brought it up. It was a kind of unspoken rule. You show up, you help, you move forward. The rest stays buried. One afternoon, an older vet named Franklin told me something that stuck. "You know what justice really is?" he said. "It's just the line between who we are and what we could have been if we stopped caring." I thought about that for a long time. Maybe that's why I kept going. Caring, even when it hurt, even when it didn't change anything, was the only thing that separated me from Amber. A few months later, I visited the facility again. The staff said Melissa had been quieter lately, less confusion, more stillness. I found her in the garden under that same magnolia tree, eyes closed, face turned toward the Sunday. "Hey Mel, I said, sitting beside her. She looked at me, squinting like she was searching for the right name. You're my sister, right? Yeah, I said softly. That's me. She nodded. Amber? No, I said, smiling. The other one. She seemed to think about that for a moment. You always cleaned up after her messes. Somebody had to. Melissa reached over and took my hand. Her grip was weak but warm. She loved you, you know, she said. Maybe in her way. We sat there for a while without talking. Just the hum of cicadas, the rustle of leaves, and the soft sound of her breathing. Later that evening, I drove down to the harbor again. The sun was setting over the water, turning everything gold and fire orange. I stood there, hands in my pockets, and realized I hadn't thought about the basement in weeks. Not the smell, not the sound, not even the lock. It was still there, somewhere in the back of my mind, but it didn't own me anymore. I went home and made a pot of coffee. No reason, just habit. Old rituals are like that, they remind you that life keeps going whether you're ready or not. On the counter sat a small box I hadn't opened since the trial. Inside were pieces of both lives, a copy of the verdict, a photo of Melissa from before everything, one of Dad's medals, and the folded note Amber had left on my desk years ago that said, "You'll thank me one day." I tore that one in half. Before bed, I went out to the balcony. The city was quiet, the kind of stillness that hums just before dawn. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something bad to happen. I thought about justice, the word people kept throwing around like it was supposed to fix something. Justice hadn't given us our money back. It hadn't restored Melissa's memory. It hadn't erased those 14 days in the dark. But it had drawn a line between mercy and consequence, between guilt and grace, between who Amber had become and who I refused to be. Justice isn't revenge. It doesn't heal what's broken. It just says, this far, no further. That night, I wrote a short note and tucked it into the folder with the Whitmore Trust documents. It read, "For Melissa, so she'll always have a place in the light. For Amber, so I'll always remember the dark." I sealed the folder and locked it away. When I turned off the lights, the apartment went quiet, but not hollow, just calm, the kind of quiet that feels earned. Somewhere out there, Amber was counting the years. Somewhere else, Melissa was forgetting the past, one day at a time. And me, I was still here, still breathing, still holding the line. That was enough.